Well, welcome to another edition of AP's Profiles in Christian Living. My name is Mark Powell, and I'm the convener of AP, which is the National Journal for the Presbyterian Church of Australia. My special guest with me today is Dr. Douglas O'Donnell. Dr. O'Donnell, as you can tell from his title, completed his doctorate at the University of Aberdeen, one of the most prestigious research institutions in the world. And he is currently the Senior Vice President of Bible Editorial at Crossway Publishing, one of the leading and, I think, best Christian publishing houses in the world at present. Dr. O'Donnell is the author and editor of over 20 books, including 7 commentaries on the Bible. He is also a well-regarded preacher and speaker, as is reflected in the distinctive style and content which his commentaries in Preaching the Word and the Reformed Expository Commentary series brings. Dr. O'Donnell has also, in the not-too-distant future, been a professor at our own Queensland Theological College here in Australia. And so I think that gives us the right to also claim him as a token Aussie. Dr. O'Donnell, thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Oh, thank you. That's the best honorary degree I've ever gotten. So thanks, Mark.
Yeah, a jar of Vegemite is in the mail, okay? I once heard Don Carson actually talk in Australia, and he lamented how informal Australians were. And he said the only people that are less informal than Australians are New Zealanders, to which we all laughed and said they don't count, which I think kind of proved his point. So if you excuse me if I refer to you as Doug, or as many Aussies would probably call you, Dougie, or something to that effect, which shows, I think, the honor and the respect that we have in our culture. The more we esteem, the more informal the genuflections come. But Doug, can you please explain to us, how did you first become a Christian?
Yeah, I grew up in a devout Irish Roman Catholic home. So my father's from Ireland, my mother's from Scotland. They moved to the States in their 20s, got married. And I was a good Catholic kid. You know, I went to Catholic grade school, private school, high school, was an altar boy, didn't drink, didn't smoke, was a virgin all through high school. So I sort of checked all the right moral boxes. And I was personally devout, especially in my high school years. I would pray the rosary, for example, in the month of May, dedicated to Mary. I was seriously considering priesthood or the monastic life. And yet I knew inside I sinned, but I could go to the priest and, you know, he would absolve my sins and that sort of thing. So after my senior year, I started dating a girl who I went to high school with. We both were at university at this time. And things got pretty serious quickly, and quickly lost my virginity, and thought, well, you know, I love her. We're committed. We're going to get married. So it's different than all my friends and everybody who's just fooling around. Just justified it rather quickly and surprisingly, now that I think of it. And then about a month into college, we learned that she was pregnant. And we were 19 years old at the time, 18 years old at the time. And we decided we would quit school. We would quit athletics. We're both playing college basketball. And we would move home. We'd eventually get married, have a baby. And that was sort of the plan. We'd start to work. So that's what we did. We told our very Catholic parents that she was pregnant, which was incredibly difficult to do. And a lot of shame involved in that, maybe rightly so. And then we both started working full time. Our relationship was very strained, as you could imagine, but I'm always an optimist. So I sort of thought, once the baby's born, everything will kind of sort itself out. But we began to grow distant. I think her parents didn't like me at all, thought I would amount to nothing. And so when my son Sean was born, I remember the first time thinking, knew God was a creator, but but I I now knew sort of firsthand by holding my son's hand that, yeah, he really is the creator. It was kind of an eye-opening moment for me. Um, Shortly after my son was born, 6 months after my son was born, we never got married. She wanted to get married after the baby, and 6 months after, right after Christmas, she broke up with me for good. And at that time, I felt like I lost everything in the world that I loved. I was a smart kid. I wasn't in school anymore. I was a good athlete. I wasn't playing basketball. Um, I loved her, and now she didn't love me back. And then I had my son, who I felt like it wasn't going to be a normal upbringing with two parents. Whatever it was going to be, it was a great loss for me. And during that time, I was working the second shift as a janitor, and I just began to think. God began to work in my brain and my heart, and two thoughts came to mind one night: is um, Doug, you're a sinner, um, and not just you sin, but you deep down are a sinner. Um, and the second thing was the only relationship that lasts forever is between God and man. And I thought that this true love that lasts forever was so quickly gone within 2 years. So with those two thoughts running through my mind, I came home from work 1 o'clock in the morning, and I just got down on my knees and began to weep uncontrollably. And I just called out to God. I said, Jesus, I know you're real. I've never doubted your existence. I've never doubted you're the Son of God. But I promise, I've never asked you forgiveness. Will you please forgive me and clean me up on the inside, because I'm full of lust and I'm full of pride. And from this day forward, I'll put you first in my life. And it was like the weight of the world fell from my shoulders, as Bunyan describes in Pilgrim's Progress. I really felt that. I didn't know what was happening. I don't even know if I knew the term born again. But I was definitely born from above. And I knew it the days after, when I felt something different. I had a greater love for God. I hated the sins I was doing. I was very convicted by them. And so I began really a new, fresh walk with God at that point. And then shortly thereafter, I was still in the Catholic Church. I was praying for a friend, someone who was a Christian, whatever that meant, and who could sort of help me out. And in God's providence, he brought an old friend from basketball into my life. And he was a Lutheran, but an evangelical. And I remember telling him my testimony, what I just told you, and he was on his bunk bed. He leaped off his bed and he gave me a Bible study booklet, and he taught me sort of how to start to read the Bible, and the rest was history. I just devoured the Bible, and eventually he was very patient with me. Over time, he said, you might want to think about going to an evangelical, or going to a Protestant church, is what he said. And I thought, like, never, like never would I do that. And but I was longing for something, because I was like reaching out, sharing with my Catholic friends, and nobody seemed to resonate with what I was talking about, in at least my circles, and even some of the brothers, priests I talked to. And so what he said made sense. And so I went to a Protestant church, and eventually became an evangelical Protestant. And this will sort of put a bow on my conversion story, but telling my parents I was leaving the Catholic Church was harder than saying my girlfriend is pregnant. That's how deep, Catholicism was in our family. So that's how God called me to himself, and started
Wow.
to call me into
I mean,
Bible
that's
reading.
incredible in so many ways. Um, yeah, more ways than you could ever imagine, I think, to my own story. But I've got to ask, how did your parents respond when you told them that?
Yeah, I think they were very, very upset, very ashamed. I remember even years afterwards, when I started to go to seminary to study the Bible, my dad would never say, he's going to be a minister. Like, he would always say, to relatives, like, oh, Douglas is, he's studying to become a priest, or he's studying, always Catholic language. And he's still to this day, although he's loosened up a lot, give me little brochures to read about this or that.
Wow.
Uh, yeah. And so I think, it sort of rocked their world, and I rocked their world in two massive ways, but having a kid out of wedlock and then shortly thereafter, leaving the Catholic Church. So yeah,
So
they were
I've got a lot of
great. Yeah, go ahead.
I have got a lot of other questions to ask you, but I'm just fascinated now by this. And I've got to ask. So they're still in the Catholic Church, are they? And you are one of, I think, one of the world's leading theologians, at least from a preaching homiletical point of view. What do they make of you now?
Yeah, I would say they're definitely proud of me in the right sense. They this will give you an example. Like, my dad reached out the other day saying, "Hey, there's someone I met um, who wants to publish a book, and I thought I could connect him with you." And so there's sort of a realization. I think they're happy with my life. That I got married and I've got 4 other kids, and so it's been, and I think the writing is great, for, I think, any parent, like, oh yeah, my son's a success in that field. So I mean, the next book I actually am doing, it's a liturgical devotional. I dedicate to them. They're still in the Catholic Church, but because they did teach me to pray. I mean, they taught me to pray to Mary too, but they did actually teach me the Lord's Prayer, Our Father. They did teach me the Gloria Patri. They did teach me the seriousness of prayer as a family before meals, those sort of things. So this book I dedicate to them, with deep sincerity. So yeah, they're still in the Catholic Church. And we've got 4 other siblings. So yeah, my older brother is still in the Catholic Church, but I think became a Christian. My other brother, super devout Catholic, and just to be Irish is to be Christian, to be Catholic. And then my parents are way more, they're kind of Vatican II at this point, where everybody's going to heaven. And so Douglas is okay, but little do they know it's guys like me who aren't going to heaven because they've left the Catholic Church and say bad things about it.
Yeah, well, that's what I think a lot of people forget is, according to Trent, we are anathema.
Yeah.
If we don't hold to transubstantiation, if we hold to sola fide. Just on that, Douglas, what do you make then of this Protestant, I guess, trying bridge building to say, well, the Reformation, and this was very big, I think, under N.T. Wright and the new perspective on Paul. It was all kind of a big misunderstanding. I know it's a very personal question to you because of what
Right.
you and I, for that matter, have come out of. But how would you respond?
Yeah, I remember when Mark Knoll, who was one of my professors at Wheaton, you know, um, wrote his book on the Reformation. Is the Reformation over, or something like that, or the Reformation is over? I can't remember what the title is. But I remember reading that and just thinking, oh, he probably, and maybe I'm judging him wrongly here, but he probably knows a lot of like Bible scholars who are Catholics, the Raymond Browns of the world, people who know the Bible, love the Bible, academics, who may really have a heart love for Jesus, who knows, but he hasn't hung out with my family. He hasn't hung out with, every single Catholic I know growing up. And I would say the same would probably be the experience of many Italians and Filipinos and Latinos, that there's this cultural Catholicism that is entrenched as, someone growing up in a Muslim family in Saudi Arabia, like that kind of feel to it, where as long as you're going through the motions, you're good. You're good with God and you're good with the family. So I think there's just a sort of a missing of the ground level of normal Catholicism, not just in America, I think, but around the world, and especially around the world. especially Latin America and things like that, where the superstition level is just, very high. But it's high in America too, in devout Catholics. It was high in, me. I I would light 3 candles, one to God the Father, one to Jesus, and one to Mary. There's my Trinity. And so I think there's been more agreement, certainly, but not sort of at the official level. It's hard to sort of pin down the Catholic Church, who besides the Pope sort of actually speaks for them, because there are just as many divisions within Catholicism as there is in Protestantism. We call them denominations. They call them the Jesuits and the Franciscans. They're just
who don't talk to one another. Yeah.
Yeah. So and
Yeah.
who's, you have one Pope who's super conservative, and then you have the next one who's not at all. So what are their theological systems and all of that, other than sacramentalism? And that's what I always come to, is their sacramentalism is what, and Mariology. Those are the 2 big ones for me. And the Reformation was about worship foundationally. And those 2 things get at the heart of what worship is. And I think as soon as I became a born again Christian, I stopped praying to Mary, like naturally stopped praying to her. And I didn't know why exactly, but I didn't feel like it was right. And then I read through the New Testament, the Gospels, afresh for the first time. I'd probably read them in school. I definitely heard them read in the liturgy. And I kept saying, where's Mary? Like, I just thought she would have a more prominent role. And then when I read certain statements, like Jesus said that to his mother, and but where's the stuff about how we should pray to Mary? Like, I just was expecting that, and didn't find it. Certainly didn't see any clarity. Like, that's what we should be doing. So I think, but sacramentalism, and this is what I feel like sometimes New Testament scholars, N.T. Wright, they miss that. Like, for the normal Catholic, sacramentalism is at the very heart of worship, and you can't take that away. So transubstantiation, that's the big deal right there. And so Protestants who don't understand that could sit at a table and just talk like, oh, well, they believe this about justification. That's so close to what we do. And you have no idea what they think about Mary, if they pray daily to her, or what they think about the sacrament and how crucial that is to their spiritual life. So those are a few thoughts. But who would have thought we'd go on a tangent on Catholicism?
Well, I never expected that we would talk about this today, to be honest. I did give you a set of questions beforehand, and hopefully we will get to them. But I've just got to say, this is fascinating. I hope all our listeners are edified by it. I think it's actually central to gospel ministry. I was talking to a young man in our congregation recently who I'm mentoring, and I said, look, the Catholic Church believes you're saved by grace. It's just, where do you get grace from? Is it through Christ alone, by faith alone, that you receive justification? Or is it through the 7 sacraments of the Church, which sort of function, don't they, as like a spiritual petrol station or gas station where you keep coming to the Bowser and you fill up the tank of your soul with grace, and hopefully at the end of the journey of your life, the tank is full. And if it's not full, then that depends on how much time you spend in purgatory, which was another big thing, wasn't it, of the Reformation, is Luther's 95 Theses. It was actually, purgatory was another vital aspect that he wanted to correct, to rebuke. Sorry, there's so many ideas going around in my head right now. I'm trying to ask you the best question. Because I grew up a very devout Roman Catholic as well. It was in the Opus Dei movement, wore a scapula, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, the double-sided necklace, front and back, which was, we used to call it the get out of purgatory free card, because, if you were wearing it when you died, her merit and her intercession would actually count for a redemptive thing. So a lot of Protestants miss that she's actually in the Catholic Church a co-redemptrix and co-mediatrix with Christ. Can I just ask you on this, and this is a pretty spicy question, I know, Doug, but what do you make, or I'm assuming you're familiar with this, the visions of Mary at Medjugorje, Fatima, other places around the world. Did you have any interaction with that growing up? Did that influence your spirituality at all? And if so, what do you make of it now?
Yeah, I definitely was aware of it, but it wasn't a major part of my own spirituality. Um, so I don't remember, being taught too much about it or any sort of emphasis on it, other than it was, this great work of God or of Mary. Um, God's still at work today. And obviously I haven't given much thought to those places in a long time. So I don't have a very informed answer, but obviously, you know, Satan can manipulate people, does manipulate people to think wrongly about things. Um, Angels are at work in this world, and evil angels and evil ways, So I think there's that whole supernatural realm that does exist, that I do believe, and that can do things that, um, signs that, would fool people into believing something. And then there's this human nature and our own gullibility, and people preying on that gullibility.
Well, it makes me think, the man of lawlessness in 2
Yeah.
Thessalonians 2. What if it was to be a woman? Um,
Mm.
what if the man was actually, actually a woman that set herself up in the church, distracting everybody from Christ? But that's
Right.
another topic for another day. We've
There you
already talked about so many personal things. I am sure listeners are saying, will want to ask this question. So forgive me if this is too personal. Please say if it is. But you mentioned before you had a young son called Sean. Your girlfriend broke up with you. Can you just fill us in? Where's that relationship now with
go.
your first son and even your first girlfriend there?
Yeah. So my son, so I've always been in his life. So had, um, child support and visitation rights. So as a child, I would get him every week or every other week. Um, and so there was that sort of steadiness of him in my life. When he was 12, so his mom, she was always like a partier drinker. She just got worse and worse, after. And so when he was 12, she got into cocaine and some heavy stuff, and she was not doing well. And she finally got to the point where she knew that, and so she gave me full custody of him. And so he came to live with me and my wife, at that point. And so we raised him from 12 to 18. So he's now 32. So, um, yeah, so we, he got married a couple of years ago, grandbaby. So there's still a relationship. It's not as strong as we would want. And he lives in Denver, so he lives, 1,000 miles away from us. But, yeah. And then his mom, I've talked to her, you know, maybe a year ago, but I hadn't talked to her in years, after that. So she's been sort of in and out of rehab most of her life.
Wow. I mean, your story just seems, and it just seems so remarkable and dramatic. It's like Augustine, before and after, his conversion. It's just incredible, and to see how God is just using you in your own life. Can I ask, to move forward? What about your own call to ministry? So amazing story of coming to Christ and God redeeming you and saving you and regenerating you. But how did you go from being a janitor working part time to now, being, a full time theologian, a prolific author, speaker? Well, how did that all come about?
Yeah. So as I was, um, working, as a janitor, I I kind of reminded me of when I got to learn about Jonathan Edwards. He'd go on horseback ride, and he'd post all these thoughts that he had, to himself, pinned to himself. So I would just take Post-its off the desk and write something down and pin it to myself, like, just so I'd, remember, this thought or whatever. I just had a lot of time by myself, cleaning, vacuuming, mopping floors, that kind of stuff. So it was a great seminary in that sense. But God, one night, I guess both my conversion and this will sound pretty mystical, but it is what it is. I felt really called to the ministry. Like, that was the word that came to mind, and I wrote it down, ministry. And that wouldn't be a word a Catholic kid typically uses, like a Presbyterian word. And so I knew what it meant. Like, it would be the same as being called to be a priest. Like, I was called to, teach the Bible to others. I had no education at that point. But I mean, just like my conversion, it was a turning point where I knew exactly what I was supposed to do with my life. And so this friend who I said who got me starting to study the Bible, I said, I want to go study the Bible. And he's like, well, right near you, you've got Trinity, and then you've got Wheaton. And I didn't know of either of these schools, even though I grew up in Chicago. I grew up 15 minutes from Wheaton, never heard of it. And so, yeah, I decided to go to Wheaton, and loved it, and just felt like I did a, Bible theology major. I was studying the Bible with people who loved the Bible, who knew the Bible, other students who loved the Bible. And in God's providence, my junior and senior year, I lived with a group of guys 6 guys, 5 out of the 6 are still in gospel ministry. So it was just this house of learning, and love for the Lord, and sharing, what's going on, theologically, what you're thinking through. I remember wrestling through predestination and things like that with this group of friends, and I got a Nazarene friend, and so just kind of, and the first time I heard about predestination, and I was like, what is that? So all of that happened, at Wheaton, and then, just continued to learn. I mean, I learned a lot under Kent Hughes. College Church is where I went to church, and Dave Helm, John Dennis, some of the Randy Gruendijk, who you may know. Randy's visited a couple times, but these were sort of my mentors. And so I felt this dual calling of, like, I always loved the life of the mind, but then, pulpit ministry, and I think what Kent did was like, yeah, I love to do that, like preach and write books, and so in God's providence, that's what I've done. But so I just kept learning, kept getting degrees, kept being really involved in church ministry, and now that I think of it, I just like the most incredible, who gets to be under Kent Hughes, and these people, and in all the resources of, you mentioned Don Carson, and just everything in the Chicagoland area. Like,
I know you're in Preaching the Word series, Douglas O'Donnell on Matthew. Look at this; it's a tome.
Yeah. Well,
how incredible!
Quick story about that is, so I knew I had preached a sermon series at College Church right after Kent had retired. So they had 3 of us kind of rotating, and I was one of them. And someone who had worked for Tyndale, the publisher in Wheaton, came up to me, and he said, you really should be a writer. You just have a really good way with words. And it was a big encouragement to me, like, yeah, I think it's time to start writing. Just around that same time, Kent left a message on, old phone message. But in between services at College Church, he said, I'd love for you to write for preaching the word. Think about what volume you might want to do. And then I was so excited, went to the second service, and in my mind, I'm like, I really want to do Matthew, but there's no way I'm going to ask for Matthew. I'm going to ask for 1 John. I'm going to ask for something smaller, less presumptuous. And then I come back from the second service. He's left another message. He said, I'd love for you to do Matthew if you're open to it. And so that's how that came about. So that was the first book. Wasn't the first book published, but it was the first book I wrote. And
wow, that's an incredible story. And I must say, I mean, it's obvious, but Yeah, you are a very gifted writer. I mean, there are some books that are just like a cat licking up milk. It's just so easy to digest that it's almost devotional in style, you know. But and yet it is devotional in style because it's all for the Lord. But it's so deep and meaty and meaningful, you know, because a lot of commentaries can be dry and technical. Um, but I think yours is this beautiful blend between, you know, theological orthodoxy, exegetical precision, and on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you've got this lovely ability to be modeling homiletical excellence and pastoral sensitivity. It's a beautiful blend. So I'm actually just reading your latest commentary at the moment on Mark's Gospel because I'm preaching through Mark's Gospel.
Right.
And can I just say, it's been food for my soul as I preach through it. And I've got 7 commentaries on my desk, and then I've got yours on my computer because I don't have the hard copy here yet. It takes a while to
Oh,
get
good.
down under.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
It's come out, so
yeah, no, but it is fantastic.
thank you.
I just wonder. I mean, I think what I've also come to appreciate about you, and I'd like to get your reflections on this. I don't know if you um, had any interactions with him, but your style of commentary is in the best way, I think, in keeping with the legacy of James Boyce. Um, you know, particularly, I'm really proud to say from a Presbyterian because it
Right.
brings all of those Reformed distinctives. There's been so many great. It's like almost been the era in the last 25 years of Baptist theologians, Grudem, you know, Carson, Piper, Mark
Yeah.
Dever. It's been a veritable who's who of really great Baptist theologians, and yet onto the scene comes you and I think Kevin DeYoung, who are really really excellent. Your thoughts or reflections there?
On me being excellent? No. um,
No, I think that well, this is what I guess I really wanted to say is you're also the senior vice president of Bible editorial at Crossway. And again, it seems to me that Crossway is doing something unique. Now, I think I know what it is, but I'd really like to hear what you think it is that Crossway.
yeah.
What unique contribution does Crossway bring to Christian publishing?
Yeah, a couple thoughts come to mind. I do think theological consistency. And so it's like I don't know, like in America, maybe it's the same. Like I have a Toyota. It's like it's known for dependability. You know, um, it's going to last. You know, over 100,000 miles, like guaranteed. So I think that sort of thought. So you it doesn't matter which Toyota you buy. Um, it's consistent. Like and so that it's similar to. And this was brought to you by Toyota, by the way. The consistency of like you may not know the author of this Crossway book, but it's got the little Crossway logo, and so you know it's been vetted. And I think that means a lot because there's great companies out there, and I buy from all of them. Like Erdman's and Baker have these great commentary series and Zondervan. But to be honest, there's just not that theological consistency where you have to know the author um, of most Christian publishing houses um, to know the trust level. And so that's just not true with Crossway. I think you can across the board know things. And I'll give you an example behind the scenes. Like, so Crossway is divided in book and Bible, and I'm on the Bible side, and Justin Taylor oversees the book side. There have been times where Justin will send me an email. Could you look at this paragraph and give me your thoughts if this is theologically okay to publish? And that sort of like really sort of narrow discernment that goes on behind the scenes happens with every book that we publish. Not to that level. I'm not getting emails all the time, but just kind of. And that was with a very prominent author. Is this okay to publish? And so I think Justin and I will go back and forth on some of those theological discussions. Or is this contributor to a Bible project what do you think of him? Is what is his reputation out there? Is he solid on all of the issues? So consistency is the first thing that comes to mind, theological consistency. The second is beauty. Crossway produces beautiful books, and it comes from the Dennis family. So Josh Dennis, our CEO, after Lane and Ebeth Dennis before him, they're just an artistic family. Josh was the VP of design for years. And so when you have the VP of design become the president and CEO, well, everything in design matters to him a lot. And his whole family has a beautiful artistic eye. And so we've always, for all of Crossway's history, like art and beauty matters, which I don't think it does to every publisher. The bottom line might matter, other things matter. But we have done some projects just because we think it's the right thing to do aesthetically. We did
do tell. Like what?
Yeah, like Mako Fujimura's Four Gospels. I don't know if you've ever seen that. That was a very expensive project that it's just beautiful. And what I'd say, the newer thing I would say in the last few years, and I'm glad I've been there almost 4 years, I certainly walked right into this, is Crossway now has that same sort of care for academics, the academic world. And so our work with Tyndale House in Cambridge, producing the Greek New Testament with them, a number of other commentary projects at the high academic level that we're working on. And so I think that, so for example, when we're going to do a new commentary series, Murray Smith is one of the editors of the Reformed Expository Theological commentary on Scripture. And what's unique about this series is it's going to be, people have to adhere to the Westminster Standards. Now, Crossway doesn't adhere to the Westminster Standards, but this series is going to have people who, and we'll have feature some Baptists, some EV free people, some other people. It's not all just Prezzies, but that's an example of, like, we care about academics. This will be our version of an academic commentary. And so, but it will have theological consistency, which you just don't have in any commentary series. It's kind of hit or miss on theology. You might have commentary series where everyone who contributes is amazing, but you don't have consistency theologically, or even sometimes a care pastorally. And so those are some of the things that come to mind as I think of Crossway. One more thing, I think it's just the culture too. It's the healthiest place I've ever worked. People encourage one another. People care about each other. One of the roles I serve there is chaplain. That's actually the first thing on my job description, because they care about the word, they care about people. And so that it's just a very wonderful place to be. And I think that shows then in the product, because you have to work together as a team to produce a nice book. It's a lot of things going on. It's not just the writer. And we have wonderful teams that work together well.
Yeah, that is just so fascinating, because particularly those last 2 points that you made, as well as the first, but it's been my own experience and I didn't realize it. Like when I've ever had to interact with even staff that might be personal assistants to authors at Crossway, or marketing or publishing, they're actually just really loving people and godly to deal with. They're really pleasant. And you come away from emails, and it's administrative things and organizing meetings, but you just come away edified. and I thought, oh, maybe that's just a one-off, but no, you're saying it's a culture, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I mean, I think the other thing that really strikes me is I love Apple products, because I think they reflect the same sort of things that you're talking about at Crossway, is that beautiful blend between excellence in a product, but also beauty in design.
Right.
So yeah, when I pick up a like a Crossway book, there is something that, I don't know, it's that tactile feel of, I've got something of quality in my hands.
Yeah.
Whereas I've seen you publish. Yeah, sorry, you go.
you get a hardcover of the Mark commentary, I just think it's so beautiful what they've done with it. Our VP of marketing came up to me the other day and he says, "I think it's one of the three most beautiful books we've ever done." And I do too. And every component of it, the paper that's used and the art design and the cover and everything. So
Wow.
you'll enjoy
Yeah,
it.
that's. I have to have another conversation about this another day, but also about the Christian and art. I've got to ask, um, what books coming, or what topics do you see coming over the hill that you think we really need books on to address, particularly as Christians in the West? What are we going to face, and what do we need to be prepared for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm probably not the best person to answer it. I don't always stay up to date with the culture
Mm.
wars or the church wars for that matter. I'm more of a me and my Bible, and I'll tell you what I think about the Bible, and I'll preach on the Bible, which maybe is the first things that actually come to my mind are stop worrying about all the culture war stuff and let's make sure that we actually believe in the authority of Scripture, and that when
Yeah.
we preach on Sunday, when we teach our children at home and in school and church, that we have good stuff to teach them. So it's like the authority of the Word is the first thing that pops to my mind. I think also related to something I actually worked on is just mentioning teaching the children. Like, and you mentioned Kevin DeYoung earlier. We've produced a suite, The Biggest Story, and curriculum's one of the things, and I worked on that project. Um, I think getting uh, people who can write, people who can think. It's the first children's curriculum I'm aware of that has two PhDs, who worked on it. And so, but we're guys who can, write to kids. And I'm not the best teacher of kids, but I've had kids, I've taught kids. But I think that to me is so important, is the children's ministry. And I think the Crossway, what we've noticed, and maybe it's just the age of our executives, they're all a little bit younger than me. They've got younger kids, they got teenagers. Like, we've got just a major gap in books to children, curriculum for churches, resources for churches and children, and then teenagers. So we just came out with a teen study Bible. But I think those things are what's like most necessary to me. Like, the theory of the Word, do we actually believe that as Christians? And then do we actually function like we believe it at every level, including, like, this is what we teach our children. We think Bible curriculum is so important that we're actually using this and we're teaching them this. Um, I think, the only other thing that comes, well, maybe two other things, but they're kind of related. And this may be more of an American thing than a Australian thing, but I think, like, the success syndrome and things like that of uh, people wanting to be popular for being popular. It's sort of, in America, it's just like we love fame. And so if you're famous, that's great. And so I worry sometimes about big conferences and things like this. And people, I'm not saying the people who have a name, have made a name for themselves or all that. Sometimes in God's providence, this is what happens. But um, I just think that I remember as a college student, I'm studying the Bible. And I remember thinking, boy, I can't wait till I'm preaching at Wheaton Chapel someday. Like, that sort of, um,
Mm.
and I think that sort of mentality is it's in the air of evangelicalism in the States. And I see it as a very dangerous thing. And I think by God's grace, I feel like the older I get, the less I care about any of that stuff, like of, being famous or something like that. And I think, and I also I write I write Bible commentaries and stuff, like, so I'm helping myself not become famous. But I think, but for someone who's very gifted and someone who, there's just a danger that I see, and that relates to the other thought of my mind is just worldliness. So Christians and Christian leaders, especially, who I interact with a lot, worldliness being shown in different ways. And you mentioned Apple. It's like, well, they've got the latest everything, that Apple produces. Like, well, do they really need that? Is that or I think of, like, alcohol. Like, I sometimes joke at my presbytery, like, these younger guys know their IPAs better than they know their Bible. and that seems like, oh, what's the big deal? But it's that they're investing so much in something that's become, in a sense, worldly, and that's, I fear for the younger generation of Presbyterians as well as just Reformed leaders in general, um, that there's a worldliness that's kind of seeped in and shows itself in various ways. So it might be aspiring to greatness the same way the world does, or caring about the things of the world instead of caring about people and caring about the things of the Lord.
Yeah, look, that's such a challenging and timely word, Doug. I mean, one of the other things that I think gets probably a free pass, particularly in Australia, and I'm sure you would have appreciated this when you lived here, is we love coffee. And it's nothing for a person to have a $3,000 coffee
Right,
machine in
right.
their house, and to
I
have a
saw that.
coffee yeah, to have a coffee habit that, is in the thousands of dollars every year. And it's just for
Interesting.
a drink.
Yeah.
I say that thinking of my own habits, so I'm
Right.
not necessarily, pointing the finger at other people. There's three fingers pointing back at me, um,
Yeah.
as the
Yeah.
old saying goes. Doug, you've lived in Australia yourself. You've served in Australia at the Queensland Theological College with Gary Miller. I'd be really interested now. There's an old Chinese proverb that says, "If you want to ask water, so if you want to find out about water, don't ask a fish." Now you're a fish out of water, so you're back in the States and you've lived here. I'd be really interested, from the safety of distance. What do you think about the Australian Church? What are our strengths and our weaknesses that we need to be aware of? Do you think? And it's good for us to know.
Yeah. Good question. Get me in trouble, right? Never get invited back. Um, yeah, I think. Well, I'll say, first of all, like the celebrity Christianity, like going to Australia, I really saw as an American, oh, we really value that. Whereas you guys, the tall poppy syndrome, like we cut them down, So I remember I actually just emailed with Gary a second ago about something. I remember Alistair Begg came to QTC, and Gary got up and said, this is Alistair Begg, and this is the soccer team he likes, and that was the introduction. And I thought, what was that? I'm like, how about a proper introduction? And so I think, yeah. So it was good that, like, the tall poppy syndrome, we're going to cut you down, could be a healthy thing, especially for Americans coming there. Um, I will say, I'll just sort of step back and just say, like, I'm indebted to Australian evangelicalism from my days at College Church. So, Kent Hughes started to befriend the Australians at Moore and the Jensen brothers. And so I had Philip Jensen come and do a retreat when I was in university ministry there on God's will, knowing God's will. It really shaped my life and actually shaped who I was going to marry and ended up marrying, because I was rethinking categories. Oh, this is what I should be looking for in a wife. So, and Graham Goldsworthy and How to Read the Old Testament. And these were major influences before I ever met these men. I was reading, what they were doing, or listening to tapes or things like that. So they had a great influence in my life. And so, in ministry, I would say, I mean, the things that jumped out at me were, I would say, I'm from the Midwest, and so, like, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Indiana, we're all like, farmers sort of background. And so, like, hard work is tremendously valued. And so I just view myself as, I'm a hardworking person. My wife is a hardworking person. Like most Midwesterners who are successful are like really hardworking people. And so I kind of came in, especially Queensland, I don't know Sydney as well, but into a culture that was like, my Hawaii, Southern California, like everybody's just kind of like, hey, let's go to the beach, or that's too much work, like, when I'm assigning them things, or just, you I didn't have Greg Beale as a teacher, but he had this long list he would give students, and you better have read everything on there. I would give a short list to my students. I'd be like, oh, and and I
Yeah,
was
we
like,
used
what?
to say when we were studying at Moore College, so many people would say, if there was one book you could read,
Yeah, there you go.
what would you recommend? I remember Tim Keller saying when he
That's
was
great.
out in Australia,
I'm
every
frozen there
culture
on
has
my
its
side.
emphasis. And he thought that for Australia, or even every city, but for Australia, he said it's leisure. It's the land of the long weekend, because we have such beautiful weather.
Yeah,
There's a laissez-faire attitude of what we would say in Australia. She'll be right, mate. Or you'll say in America that was no problem, or you're welcome. We'll say, yeah, no worries.
yeah,
It's just it's almost like if you could put it in a Disney film, it'd be Hakuna Matata.
yeah. I was going to say
No worries, no
no
responsibility.
worries is probably the thing I heard the most. Um, and for me, though, actually, I was coming out of like really being burnt out from pastoral ministry. That culture actually was like great for me. Like, hey, Doug, you need to slow down, and you can learn how to rest. And then by the time I'm leaving, I'm like, you guys rest too much, um, and
6 days you shall work.
so so part of it is not. I think that's more cultural than like accusatory of like, oh, you guys, all you care about is leisure. I really do. That's why I compare it to Hawaii or something like hang loose. There's something about a beach culture that is going to affect you compared to a cold, frozen flatland, where I'm from. And so I think I'm aware of that. And the other thing that comes to mind is and there's good and bad to this in my mind, and this would come from Moore and from Sydney Anglicanism, which obviously affects evangelicalism in Australia, um, is just the low church mentality. And so, coming from a Catholic background, very high church, and then now I'm a Presbyterian who's, I'm kind of not low church for sure. I'm certainly not way high church. So I'm sort of middle church. But I think I really value that middle part. So I value liturgy. I value the care in which a service is ordered and thoughtfulness of prayers and all of that. You can have that in low church if the people leading are good. Um, but I think because of it's a local thing, the fight against the charismatics, the fight against the high church Anglicans who are liberals. Well, I don't have any of that baggage, and so I know plenty of high church Anglicans here who are not at all liberal, or Presbyterians who are not at all liberal. And I know charismatics who are word people, and so we're not because I wasn't fighting the same battles as the Jensen brothers and others. I just have a different outcome of like, I'm not going to de-emphasize the sacrament. I remember walking into Presbyterian church I attended at one point, and the altar, whatever, for communion, the table for communion, is set aside to the side, and it's got a cover over it, like just like almost like something thrown over it, not like a special cover. And I thought, boy, you'd never see that in America. Like you just never see that. Even in low churches, like you just wouldn't have a table, but sort of like the disrespect for the sacrament is sort of how I like my gut reaction. And I'm like, you're Presbyterian, like this is a big deal, like but I think it comes from like anything that gets close to high church Anglicanism or Catholicism, danger, 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 and I just never thought that way, and so I saw it as a weakness or an overreaction to some of the history and some of the real struggles, that were going on back in the day. And I'm not sure it's the same. It was definitely that way when I was there.
Fascinating. And I know your next book is on liturgy. So just if I can ask, do you think more liturgical care is something that, particularly for us in Australia, we could benefit from?
I think so, yeah, or just certain resources. So I do think seeing, Cranmer's the great liturgist, seeing like some of what he did, talking about the Protestant Reformation as a reformation of worship, and Calvin thought so much about worship, Luther thought so much about worship and singing and things like this. So I've given a lot of thought to those things because I do think they shape a person. So it's not, I'm not dogmatic at all, but at college church, we would say the Apostles' Creed. Well, I grew up Catholic, saying the Nicene Creed. So I know 2 creeds by heart because they were in the liturgy. And I remember meeting someone, a sort of prominent evangelical leader who was just discovering about Nicaea and all this. And he's like, the Nicene Creed by heart? I'm like, yeah, it's like, I didn't do anything. I just memorized it because I said it every Sunday. And so, but what it did is it inoculated me to bad theology. And so that little, 2 minutes of a worship service could be very beneficial. Again, I'm not saying you have to say a creed. I'm just saying that's one example of something. The book I'm writing is a personal devotional, and the impetus was from a friend who he's an elder to church. He was just really a dry season spiritually, and like, teach me to pray. Like, what should I do? So the book is like, well, here's 40 days of prayers. Start with the Gloria Patri. So, say the Lord's Prayer. Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. These are all prayers that Christians have said throughout the ages that are really good prayers and really helpful if you just don't know where to start. And so a lot of them are straight from the scripture. Some of them are like, I take Daniel's prayer in chapter 9 and I reword it in a way. So a lot of scriptural prayers, and then just classic prayers that help, and then hymns, classic hymns that if you learn these hymns by heart, you'll have good theology, but you'll also, Lord willing, grow devotionally. So I think there's a place both in the corporate gathering and in personal devotion where liturgical structure of the past and present, people still think about liturgy and how it should be done, can be really beneficial to the church.
Fantastic. Well, look, Doug, I feel like I could talk to you for another hour easily, but we probably should end it there. Hopefully this will be part 1. And in the future, maybe even when your book comes out on liturgy, we can do part 2 and do a deep dive. That'd be fantastic. When does the book get released?
That book is out in the fall, I think October.
Okay. All right. Well, let's pencil in. I'll talk to your godly assistant as to another interview. That'd be fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for being so open and transparent with your own journey, your own relationship with God, your own walk with the Lord, and all that's meant. We've really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for your gracious invitation and your encouraging words.
It's been a blessing, and I hope you have been as blessed as I have been. And I look forward to seeing you next time in AP's Profiles in Christian Living.